welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Mrs. Espinoza and I am a kindergarten teacher in Texas. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down 9 classroom management tips for elementary school teachers, and I created this list based on what strategies and practices are most conducive to creating a thriving classroom environment. But even so, I know that there's things that I'm not going to get to cover, so whether you're a new teacher or you're a veteran, please feel free to share your own tips or advice down in the comments. And as you're watching, please make sure to hit the like button if my video is helpful. That really helps my channel. And also, just any resources that I mentioned will be linked in the description. So let's get started. So classroom management is one of the most important elements in making sure that we create the best learning environment for our students. And this can't be reduced to a single thing that a teacher does. Instead, I would describe it as a process with a series of strategies and practices that help your classroom run smoothly every day. So let's dive into when this process begins. The first tip is probably something that you've heard before: build positive relationships with your students and your parents. But what does that mean and what does that look like? Building relationships means that you're getting to know your kids, and this should definitely be the focus at the beginning of the school year or just whenever you're starting to teach a new group of students. I start this process the very first time that I meet my students and parents during teacher meet and greet. I have a student survey and I ask information that is going to help me learn about my kids and their families. And I have my example here. This is a free download in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. And I ask just the most important questions: who the child lives with, do they have any allergies, diet concerns, what their cultural background is, what languages they speak at home. I teach in an immigrant community and most of my students are English language learners. I also ask if they have any siblings and what their ages are. I ask how that child will be going home, what that child enjoys doing at home, and if they have any weaknesses or fears. And now once we start classes, a best practice would be to have like some sort of daily check-in with your students through a morning greeting or a morning meeting. With a morning greeting, a teacher stands at the classroom door. They greet the students as they're coming in with their greeting choice. I have 4 choices on my door: a hug, a fist bump, a salute, or a dance. And with the morning meeting, this can be 5 to 10 minutes where you ask your students the questions or you're asking how they're feeling. And it's just a good time to set aside and build that classroom community. And building relationship with your students, I think, really comes down to just making that time to listen to them and to talk with them. Now let's talk about parent communication. Find a way to keep in contact with parents. Some teachers have a weekly or a monthly newsletter or a calendar. Some teachers prefer an app, others prefer email, some prefer just a combination of the aforementioned. So just whatever you decide, make it clear at the beginning of the school year what your contact hours are. And whatever you decide, just make sure you have those clear boundaries. And I highly advise not to give your parents or your students your real phone number. I have a teacher number. It's a free Google Voice number. So you just download the Google Voice app and it lets you pick a number and you can text and receive phone calls from that number. But there's also an option in the app settings that is called Do Not Disturb, and it does not allow for phone calls to be received. And I honestly just keep it on that setting. I only reply to text. But my primary method of parent communication is through an app called Talking Points. And as I mentioned, I teach in an immigrant community, so I've had families that speak Farsi, Dari, Pashto, Bengali, Amharic, Arabic, Urdu, Spanish, so many languages. So I was over the moon when I discovered this free app because it can translate in over 100 languages, and parents don't need to download it. I send pictures, short videos to the parents of their child, and I celebrate their work, or I share cute pictures, and it literally just takes a couple of minutes and it helps that child feel proud of their work. And parents just love getting those sort of positive messages about their child. Tip number 2 would be to have predictable procedures and routines for your students. Children need structure and predictability. Having consistency makes them feel safe, and it also allows them to develop independence. Teaching routines in your classroom starts when students walk into your classroom. What should be the first thing that they do? As an example, my students put their lunch bags away on the counter. They go to their cubbies. They get their yellow folders where they have their morning work. They sit at their assigned table spot where they have communal supplies at their table. So they have pencils, colored pencils, scissors, glue sponge. They don't need to be getting up to get supplies. And then we have breakfast in the classroom. So if they want breakfast, they line up. If they open juice or milk that they do not finish, it needs to be poured in the sink. If they need utensils, I have a blue basket where they get it by themselves without having to ask me. And then I ask everyone to start cleaning up before we go to ancillary at about 8:10. And they know to throw their trash away, wipe their table spots, push in chairs, and then they line up at their line spot. So this is just like a very small glimpse of our morning routine, and there are so many procedures to teach. And I did create a free resource that helps a little bit with the classroom procedures and routines. It is a checklist. So I listed some items to think about, some suggestions to think about when you're coming up with procedures and routines. And then I left some blank lines so that you can fill in whatever else you need to add. So the freebie comes with this checklist, but it also comes with a completely blank one. So I print mine. I can just write it in dry erase and check it off as we go through it at the beginning of the year. So when your students know what to do and what to expect, they're more likely to carry out those tasks independently with minimal reminders. That is the goal. And personally, I hate transitions that require us to leave the classroom. Those are the hardest for me because kindergartners have a hard time being quiet in the hallway, walking, and it's just something that I dread when we transition. In the classroom, I do incorporate brain breaks. We like to do dances from Just Dance Kids or Maple Leaf Learning, both of which are on YouTube. Now, tip number 3 is to have visuals in your room that will remind students of expectations and to use attention getters. So at the beginning of the year, it's also just a best practice to make anchor charts with your class or have posters about those behavior expectations. And in my classroom, we sorted pictures and we discussed what good choices and sad choices are. We read What Should Danny Do? And it's a book that teaches kids about the power of their choices. And when you're coming up with your classroom rules, try not to have more than 5. You don't want to overload your students. And talk about the safety aspect of rules. If you're phrasing everything with no hitting, no running, no this, no that, that sort of phrasing doesn't help a child understand the appropriate behavior. Instead, focus on what you want the child to do and then decide how to encourage that behavior. So for example, we use kind words. Give examples of what it means to be kind, like giving compliments. My kids can be rude. They push each other out of the way often. So when I'm addressing this, I might say, you wanted your friend to move, so you pushed them. You may not push. You are hurting your friend, and they don't like that. When you want someone to move, you need to use your kind words and say, move, please, or excuse me, that is my spot. Another visual in your classroom could be for nonverbal signals like hand signals. At the school that I student taught, they use this hand signal for the bathroom. And then they also had a hand signal when they related to something, but somebody else was speaking. So they just went like this with their finger. And it was very cool because both of those hand signals were incorporated school-wide. Another great visual is a timer because it's going to help students focus for that frame of time. And it also helps them understand the concept of time better. So when my kids do independent work, I have a timer up from YouTube, and when it goes off, they know it's time to stop. I have also seen teachers that have visuals for voice levels. Your students will get rowdy, so how are you going to get their attention? So another good strategy to incorporate is to have callbacks or chants that are quick phrases or words that are going to help redirect your students' attention to you. And one of my callbacks, for example, is I say class, class, and my students respond with listen, listen. And if they do not all respond, then I repeat it. I get in their face until I have everyone's attention. So other examples could be everybody stop, hands on top, or macaroni and cheese, everybody freeze. Some teachers also buy doorbells that they hang on their lanyard and they ring it to get their students' attention. That's another popular thing. Children love to talk and share. So lastly, just remember to make time for your students to speak during structured conversations. During whole group teaching, have opportunities for your students to share their thoughts with a partner for a few seconds. You can use sentence stem to guide those conversations, and this helps them practice wait their turn to speak and speaking in complete sentences. And before we move on from students and their incessant talking, one of the biggest teacher struggles, especially with little ones, is blurting out and talking over each other. So I came across this idea called blurt beans, where a teacher has a jar and your students could be awarded the beans individually, or maybe you use them throughout the day to give to everybody, but the kids have to work together to reach a classroom treat. You put the beans in a jar. So I've seen that a lot in the teacher Facebook groups. It works for some teachers. And lastly, again, teaching little ones, I have learned that you cannot listen to every single thing that they say. So I have learned to cut them off if it's a comment that is off task. So if a student just starts talking about something totally off task, I simply say, that's not what we're talking about. You can tell me later, and then move on. Tip number 4 is to be mindful of your language, and this includes like your body language and the language that you use to talk to your kids. One of my biggest mistakes my first couple of years was definitely lack of patience and yelling when I was frustrated. And I was part of a wonderful team of veteran teachers, and I quickly learned from them that body language says more than yelling. Yelling doesn't help, it's ineffective, and kids have a much harder time remembering things or functioning well cognitively when their brain is flooding by those distressing emotions like anxiety or fear. Being yelled at is not fun. It interferes with their brain's ability to process new information effectively. So just focus on using a firm, neutral voice, be at that child's eye level, make eye contact with them. And if they are avoiding eye contact, I know I say, look at me when I'm talking to you. And just be aware of the words and the phrases that you use with your students, because they will pick up on those words and phrases you use. Some of my common phrases include, that's not your business, or focus, or no thank you. My kids are incredibly nosy as well. So if I'm talking to somebody about something they did, and I'll have a few that'll come and listen in, and I'll stop and I say, this is not your business, goodbye. And I have heard the kids say that to each other as well, this is not your business. If I'm working at my small group table and my kids are not focusing, I'll just say, so and so, focus. And if I see a behavior that I do not like, this does not work for every child, but for most children, I will just call their name and say, no thank you, and they know what I'm referring to, what I want them to stop. Now, tip number 5 is to teach your students how to problem solve. And I honestly think that this is the hardest with lower grades because it's just ongoing all year. Most children tattle about anything and everything. She's touching my hair. He pushed me. Him skipping me. And perhaps you have heard teachers say, use your words, but you have to model to your students how to use their words, how to problem solve in different situations. So if your friend is touching your hair and you don't like that, what can you say? Hey, stop touching my hair. I don't like that. If your friend is skipping in line, what can you say? Go to your line spot. This is my spot. If a friend does not stop, then you can come and tell me and I will talk to them. And I definitely praise them when I hear them using the words, oh, I hear so-and-so tell their friend to stop kicking their chair and that friend better stop. So equipping your students with the language to use to solve their problems will lessen the tattling. There are students that have a hard time with this though, so you just constantly have to coach them through that problem solving, and teaching students how to self-regulate and respond in those social situations is definitely just another inevitable facet of teaching. The next tip is to follow through with consequences that make sense. And this was the most difficult for me when I started teaching. And I think back to when I was in elementary school, and I remember that a common consequence that teachers imposed on us was to work or just sit out during recess time. But I don't think taking away recess helps. And I personally do not take away recess unless they have hurt somebody. You want to have a consequence that addresses the behavior, and taking recess away does not allow that child to get their energy out anyway. So it's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. And a common mistake that teachers make too is just making empty threats. And that's not effective because it teaches the child that they can get away with things because they learn that you are not going to do what you threaten them to do. So why should they stop that behavior? And one of my consequences when I am really having a hard day with a student and I've had to redirect them just constantly is just to send them to another classroom and just have a break. I don't do this often, but I mean, when my patience is just nearly done, like that student just needs a break from this familiar environment. I need a break from them, and they don't enjoy going to another classroom to go finish their work. And I have really great teammates that we support each other like that. We understand the struggle, so we have no problem, if your kid needs to come to my class and vice versa. And lastly, just remember that consequences are probably going to be different for different children. So with some kids, you're just going to need to have a talk about how you're not happy with the choice. They'll fix it. But others are going to need that constant positive praise. Now, tip number 7 is to establish a reward or a behavior system. And I'm going to start by addressing the importance of intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation involves performing a task because it's personally rewarding to you. And extrinsic motivation involves completing a task or like exhibiting a behavior because outside causes such as avoiding punishment or receiving a reward. So how do you attain that intrinsic motivation? Daniel Pink has a model that focuses on enabling people to become intrinsically motivated. And he listed 3 elements for motivation: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, being independent. So again, if you're establishing good procedures and routines and students know what to expect, they're going to be more likely to be independent, to have that autonomy. But with that said, children love earning special treats for things that they're supposed to be doing. And I make sure that I praise them for working hard and using language that demonstrates that they are capable of focusing and learning independently. And there's just so many ways to reward your students. Some cost money, some don't. I have always had individual point system to encourage students to take ownership of their actions. So the first point system that I had was through Class Dojo, but it was really time consuming to have to put the points and to take them away. And then I had like a fake money system where the kids earned dollars for their quick choices. And at the end of the week, they would count their money and they could get something from a treasure box. But that was kind of expensive. I was spending more than I would like. So these past couple of years, I implemented a tally mark point system. So it's the same concept as the money, but it's just a simple chart. And I just add points for their good choices. At the end of the week, if they have their 10 points, then they can have a special Friday treat, which I usually will buy them like something to eat, like ice cream, popsicles, cupcakes, popcorn. And other incentives that do not cost money can be brag tags, coupons, or positive notes. And brag tags are used to celebrate that positive behavior. So when a student demonstrates a behavior that the teacher feels is very commendable, then you reward them with a tag. And this could simply be like a cute special note too, that they take home and parents are aware of something that they did. And coupons can be for maybe lunch buddies. They can earn a lunch buddy treat. Maybe they can take their shoes off for the day. They can wear pajamas. They can bring a special toy. They earn special things that they can do in the classroom. Now, tip number 8 is to teach your students social emotional strategies so they know what to do if they're feeling upset. So if you have students that get upset often, it's a good idea to set up like a cool down corner where they have items or visuals that will help them calm down. I had a small bin with a coloring book, a pinwheel so they can blow. They had a stress ball and then a poster reminding them of things they could do. Something else I've seen more educators practicing with their students is a growth mindset. And with a growth mindset, it's an idea that your intelligence isn't fixed. You never stop learning and you see a challenge or a difficulty as an opportunity to improve and keep learning. Lastly, tip number 9 is to stay organized. Time management is one of the most difficult and important aspects of teaching. Making sure that you have your lesson plans, your activities ready. I notice that when I'm not ready, when I don't have things ready for my students, then I start seeing those behaviors. And differentiate for your students. Make sure that they're able to complete their work independently, that you've taught them how to do it during small group, and that they have early finisher activities. Because if you're just giving them something that you've just taught maybe once or twice, and they haven't completely understood what to do, they're not going to know how to complete that work, and then you're gonna get those off-task behaviors. So just make sure that it's work they're able to do independently. Make sure that your classroom is organized, that your students can independently go get materials without having to interrupt you. And as I wrap it up, I would just like to say that I have not experienced having like a very difficult, defiant student. So I don't feel like I can offer any advice on that. I have witnessed other teachers have aggressive, defiant students that will just destroy their classroom. And all that is done is just removing that child from the classroom while the admin handles the situation. the student is removed for the day, and then teachers document, and it's just one of the big flaws I see in our educational system. There's just inadequate support for teachers and the students in those difficult situations. But that pretty much wraps it up, y'all. Those are my 9 tips for classroom management. Again, make sure to leave me a comment. I know that I didn't cover every single thing because there's just so much, and there's so many awesome strategies that teachers implement. So let me know any favorite strategies that you implement in your classroom. Please make sure to give my video a thumbs up if you made it all the way through. Make sure to also please subscribe for more future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!